Hey guys, welcome back to another video and happy Monday. I cannot believe we're already in week 2 of 2023. Anyways, today, as promised, we're going to be looking at the weekly update of where you should be in terms of the trucking market to grab as many opportunities as possible. If you're new to this channel, a warm welcome to you. I teach about the trucking industry with a heavy focus on the spot market. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe down below. Without further ado, let's dive into the current freight market situation. Ready? Let's go. So before we begin, for those of you who joined the live yesterday, thank you so much for joining. I had so much fun. I hope you guys had fun, and I hope you learned something because we were answering questions for 2 hours? For those of you who couldn't join, I decided I am going to make these lives twice a month on Sundays, and I will be posting the details in my community tab beforehand so that you guys know when I'm planning to go live in advance. Anyway, back to the video. As always, I will be using the Sonar system in order to take an in-depth look into the market. And just as a reminder, Sonar currently has data only for dry vans and reefers, some data for flatbeds, but not too much. But once they start adding flatbed data, I will share that with you as well. So I'm going to follow the same format I did last week with one additional chart. So the first thing we're going to look is at the van capacity trend score. Again, as a reminder, what is a trend score? Well, it shows us supply and demand in a particular market. The closer the value is to 100, the tighter the market. It does give us insight into your negotiating power as a carrier. It does not give us insight in what the load rates are like in a particular area, but let's take a look. So for the van is in Savannah, Georgia. Number 2 is Bloomington, Illinois. Then there's Texarkana, Texas, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Joliet, Illinois, and you can see it right here. Now, in terms of places where you do not have as much negotiating power, we'll take a look at the lowest to highest. San Antonio, Texas. The market is on the side of shippers and brokers. You don't have much negotiating power there. Brooklyn, New York, Ontario, California, Connecticut, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania. All of these places you will not have as much negotiating power with a dry van. Now let's take a look at the reefer. So if you have a reefer, your best bet in terms of being able to negotiate that rate up is if you're in the Twin Falls, Idaho area. Number 2 is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. There's Chicago, Illinois, Fresno, California, Elizabeth, New Jersey, etc., etc. You can see it right here. Now, where do you not want to be in terms of negotiating power if you have a reefer? Well, no surprise here. Miami, Florida is definitely a place where you will not have negotiating power. The market is on the side of the shippers and brokers. Number 2, Virginia, Houston, Texas. And now remember, these are just market areas because Washington, just because Seattle, Washington is here, doesn't mean that all of Washington is bad. And I'll explain that later on in the video. So this is the second chart I wanted to show you that I did not show last week because I didn't know it existed. This is the van outbound tender lead times. How much time do shippers allow to book the load with a carrier, which means how far in advance are they looking for someone to haul the load? After speaking to Sonar, they explained to me that basically the higher the lead time means that shippers are anticipating that they will not have an easy time selling loads. So that can give us some insight. For vans, Rapid City, South Dakota, Sioux Falls, I don't know, my pronunciation sucks. I have no idea. Somewhere in South Dakota, these are places where the tender lead times are pretty high. Shippers are not expecting to find a carrier quickly, which is some good insight for you to know. It might give you some negotiating power there, right? So we see Michigan, Illinois, Missouri, again, Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, Jefferson City, Missouri, and so on. And these are days. So for Rapid City, South Dakota, it's 4 days between the moment when the load is available for offering and the moment when the load should be going out, right? And we can see it right here. Now for reefers. So for reefers, the best place is Pendleton, Oregon. You see the lead time is 7 days between the moment the load is offered to carriers to the moment when it has to actually go out, which means that shippers here are a little bit worried about not finding a truck. Then we have Washington, Spokane, don't judge me. Bismarck, North Dakota, Fargo, North Dakota, Twin Falls, Idaho, and so on. You can see that the lead times for reefers are generally higher than for dry vans. Now my favorite tree map of all. I think it's called a tree map. Maybe it's a heat map. I'm not sure. But these are van outbound tender rejection rates, or index, the rejection index. And basically, tender rejections will give us insight from what I have seen into how high the load rates are on the spot market. And we'll double check together. So the top three for vans is Duluth, Minnesota, Omaha, Nebraska, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I give up. Anyway, you can see that the tender rejection rate is 22.59 in Duluth, 20.25 in Omaha, and 19.33 here. Now, in terms of the colors, it just shows us how much it has changed within the last week and the percentages, right? So from last week in Duluth, it increased, the tender rejection rates increased by 48%. If it's red, it means it decreased. So these are the three markets that seem to be with the highest tender rejection rates for vans. So let's look at the load board today and see if it matches up with load rates.
We saw that the best place in terms of tender rejections is Duluth, Minnesota. Oops, I'm putting it in the wrong thing. I believe this was the same as last week. What does it look like? Volumes look good. In terms of rates, well, to Nevada, to the West Coast, it's amazing. Let's take a look somewhere closer to the Midwest, the South. Let's see, you know what? I'm going to filter it by the Midwest. Yeah, 652 miles for $2,700. That is amazing. So it's a pretty great area to be. The next one is Omaha, Nebraska. I believe it is the same as last week. It was also one of the best places in terms of rejection rates. So let's take a look. The volume is fantastic. Let's filter it again. So it's okay, like this one is good. It's almost $3 per mile. We have San Antonio, Texas. What about shorter loads right here? Okay, to North Dakota, it's $1,800, and this can be done in 1 or 2 days. This is a team load, it doesn't count. Ohio, let's see, let's take a look at shorter loads, a little bit shorter. Here we go, South Dakota, maybe something other than South Dakota, right here. This is $3 per mile pretty much, so pretty awesome place. Next we have Something Falls in South Dakota is the third best place for a dry van. And here the volume is okay, and we can see we filtered it by the Midwest and the South, and it's pretty decent rates here. $3 per mile, this is way over, I don't even know how many dollars per mile this is. It looks pretty great. So yeah, you can see that this Sonar Outbound Tender Reject Index is applicable to the real life market. You can see that if you're looking at Tender Reject Index, the higher it is, the better the rates in the area.
Now in terms of reefers, top three, Bismarck, North Dakota at 47% or 47.5% almost in terms of tender rejections. Number two is Fargo, North Dakota at 42%. And number three is Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 26.67%. And you can see that in all three cases, for the top three markets where the tender rejection rates are highest, they all increase from last week. So again, let's check out the load board to see if it matches up.
The biggest tender rejection is from Bismarck, North Dakota for a reefer. There is not a ton of volume here, but in terms of rates, yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, Florida, Oregon is pretty good. For Texas, look at that, $4,700 for 1,163 miles. So great place to be. So then the second one is Fargo, North Dakota. And we see the volume here is better and the rates are awesome. Okay, we have Florida. Let's take a look at, okay, San Antonio, Texas. $5,000 for a reefer. Not bad at all. And finally, we have Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The volume is really good here, and we can see, yeah, the rates are amazing for a reefer.
Now, of course, my favorite part is this 3D market map. If you're new, basically what it means, the height of a place means how much volume there is, how many actual loads are going out. The darker blue an area is, the higher the tender rejection rates, which means that the load rates are higher, right? So this is for a dry van, and we can see still that Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, areas in Iowa and Minnesota, they're really good for the dry van in terms of tender rejection rates. And in general, the Midwest and the South, it's pretty good for dry vans. Then there are places like California where there's a ton of volume, but the tender rejection rate is not there. Atlanta is one of those places as well. But let's take a look at the reefer map. So for the reefer, you will see that places like the eastern part of Washington, Idaho, Utah, of course, the Midwest is fantastic in terms of rejection rates. And there's also a ton of volume from these places right here. Now in Dallas and in the Fort Worth area, there's a lot of volume, but the rejection rate is pretty low, just like in Atlanta, Georgia, also for a reefer. So you can see from this map that for a reefer, the Midwest is also a really good place to be. Finally, let's take a look at the diesel prices, shall we? So these are the diesel truck stop actual price per gallon, and this is updated on a daily basis. So if we zoom in right here, we are on the 9th today, yeah. So you can see the national diesel prices are still going down. They're at an average of $4.70 per gallon. But if we want to look at the map to see where the best places to refuel are, well, here you go. The darker blue an area, the higher the diesel price. So for example, the darkest blue will be over $5.60. The lighter an area, below $3.85, the less the diesel price. So right away you can see that the East Coast and California, of course, and the West Coast in general, they have higher diesel prices. The Midwest and the South is where the diesel prices are the lowest. So now putting it all together, the Midwest seems to be, just like last week, it seems to be the place with the highest tender rejection rates, which translate into load rates on the spot market as we saw, and of course the best place for fuel prices. And this is both for dry vans and reefers. In the past week, I have kept both of my dry vans in the Midwest, and it has been incredible. The rate per mile is insane. The daily gross is very, very good. So if you're able to, if you're working for yourself, you're an owner operator and you don't mind smaller miles and making a good gross income, the Midwest is definitely the place to be. In terms of reefers, yes, the Midwest is an incredible place as well, but there are some areas on the West Coast that are good too. For example, Utah is a good place to be. It's decent, it's not great. But if you end up in a place like Pasco, Washington, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or the area around Pasco, Washington with a reefer, then you are kind of winning the jackpot there, because the rates from Pasco, Washington and the places surrounding it are insanely good for reefers. I absolutely love when one of my guys ends up in that area. Of course, I don't love the weather, but hey, beggars cannot be choosers. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you understand how to fine-tune your operations this week in order to grab the most opportunities available on the market. And I'll see you all in the next video.